name's Mike Chacon, metal sculptor. Met steel in 1987 to a man named Jake Grossberg at Bard College, and fell in love with it, and I'm making metal sculpture. Still friends with Jake. I've got quite a few different series of work going on at the same time. There's a few different styles going on. I like to bounce around a little bit. I don't like to stay constrained to one piece at a time, because metal is more forgiving than people give it credit for. It's not very intimidating to me once I realize that if I break a piece of steel, I can fix that steel. I mean, it is very forgiving. If you weld too deep, if your hand slips, whatever, if you make a cut too far, you could fix it and make it like it never happened. To have inspiration, man. The ball never stops rolling. I'm in bed at night, I'm thinking about it. My wife, tell you, I keep her up at night because I get aggravated about making art. It's a lifestyle that I just sort of grew into, and I'm never without. Form is infinite. And as long as form remains infinite, there'll always be inspiration to make a shape. And with every shape is a sculpture. With every form, there's a sculpture. With every line, there's a sculpture. Everything has form. And your imagination can run wild with it. And I can honestly say, what inspires me, I guess, just getting up. Came back. And then I met Jake Grossberg, who ended up being my professor and advisor and mentor. And without meeting him, I don't think I would have been a very, very, very late bloomer if I hadn't met Jake. I'm trying to stay away from the, I know what it is right off the bat, viewer's attitude. I like for people to look at the form for form's sake, and then find the figure in the form, and then what happens around the figure. So it's serious to me. I think it's very serious. The way I attack making whatever form it is at the time, even if it is just a blade of grass.
Well, that's the first prelude from Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier. It's the prelude in C, and everyone, or many musicians, know about these. This is 48 preludes and fugues in all keys. I've been playing these since I was very young. I still can't play them all, and this is what I love about them. They're like the most complex of crossword puzzles. They're a spiritual crossword puzzle, an intellectual crossword puzzle, an artistic crossword puzzle. And you can work and work and work on all of them, and you'll never get them. As a conductor, I've learned that my traditional conducting of a Mozart Missa Brevis or a Bach cantata or something along those lines improves to the degree that I listen better to it. That's really what I do as a conductor. I mean, the gesture is important, and the relationship with my singers and instrumentalists is important, but what's really important is the quality of my listening. Hildegard of Bingen was a 12th century abbess, mystic, doctor, musician, artist, philosopher, and rebel. At a time when women were pretty much relegated to a wifedom, kind of a menial life, or the life in a convent. She was in a convent and was actually in seclusion for many years. But when she came out, she took control. She was an architect. She designed and supervised the building of the new convent. I think the people are still plumbing the depths of her work. She wrote so much and did so many paintings that people are still reaching into it to see the dimension of it. So when I put up the Philip glass, Einstein on the Beach, knee play, I just put it out there for 8 minutes, counting, and they hear what they hear. What I have come to hear in Einstein on the Beach is very literal. Einstein somehow watching and listening to the waves and dividing it into numbers, making it science. And to me, that's what those numbers are about. The opera is Einstein on the Beach. And in many ways, it's very, very funny. For instance, in the opera, the whole chorus that is singing, and they sing for 4 or 5 hours, are all dressed like Einstein with the wigs and the suspenders and the baggy pants. So there's a whole visual element that when you do it for choir is missing. What's really important is the quality of my listening. As a conductor, that's my job. I'm not singing, I'm not playing an instrument. Everyone else is singing and playing an instrument. I'm listening. And that's a job that has to be taken really seriously. And that's what makes the piece work and express and do its job in the world. When you get beyond the notes, the words, the music, the technique of it, you're beyond that, then you're expressing a truth, and that truth is what everyone recognizes. That's why people love music and art.
When people are inspired, they imagine. When people imagine, they have hope. When people are hopeful, they come together. When people come together, they can do great things. Imagine, hope, come together, do great things.
All right, Sherry and I have been making pottery for 34 years or so, and we've gone through maybe 4, 5 major styles. We began by making functional stoneware, dinnerware, casseroles, cream and sugars, teapots, and simultaneous with that we kind of do sort of what we call more of our art pottery on the side. I did a real geometric work, and Sherry did these kind of landscape, fantasy landscape pottery. And at that time we had completely separate work. We shared a studio, but we had separate work. I like working on the wheel, and I like symmetry. It's sort of the opposite of from Sherry's inspiration. And I like in nature, I like the geometry of nature, so I'm really like drawn to the forms, the geometric forms of seed pods and flowers for their sort of geometric beauty. And I like to bring that to the way I work with clay. And the kind of pottery that we're making now, this arts and crafts style, is just a perfect fit for those interests, because the traditional kind of leaf patterns that were done on this type of pottery, which is related to the arts and crafts period, is a geometrical sort of patterned decoration, which is more what I tend to do. Since I throw the pottery, I'm real interested in the form, and when I decorate it, I just like to put it sort of like a pattern on the form that enhances the form, whereas Sherry uses it as a canvas and decorates the surface.
And so my inspiration comes from a lot of different places. Of course, it comes from my experience, you know, and the different things that I've seen throughout my life, but also from just a lot of natural forms that I see. I'm a big gardener, so of course a lot of that comes from there, but it doesn't come from like as directly as you would think. It's not like I go to the garden and I say, oh, this is pretty, I want to put this in a pot. It's not quite that way. What it is, it's more like everybody's learning and inspiration. It's like just being open to different experiences and visual experiences especially. Because I went to Haystack Mountain School of Crafts back in '73, and I went in jewelry, and because I thought, well, this would be neat. The material just, I couldn't communicate with it as well. And what I think is important about my choosing clay is that it is malleable. I can change it. Oh, I don't like this. Change this, and you know, oh, I'll start over. I'll do this. And it's not expensive material. Clay is like, what, I don't know, 7 cents a pound or something, you know. I mean, it's not something that, it's not like I throw it away, but you can reform it, add water to it, and remake it. It's not like you're throwing a piece of silver away or a piece of gold away. I mean, it's not that precious. I'm working with earth. I'm working with the ground. It's not expensive, and it is somewhat forgiving. The process of firing and glazing and all that, it becomes more unforgiving. But the process of making something, if you choose the right clay, because there's a million different kinds of clay, and there's a million different kinds of firing, and that's another attractive thing about pottery, is that there's a lot of possibilities in this medium.
Well, I'd like to say good morning to all of our old customers, or I should really say our old friends, and the new ones to come. I don't know if you know anything about NICO and how it started, but there were 2 of us then, and myself and my husband. And we were actually in the brass business, brass and copper business. And I had married him when I was in the flower business, and I was doing a small amount of interiors. He actually was one of our vendors, and I bought the whole package. And it was a God's blessing that I did. When we went to China, at this one point in time, the brass business started to fade, and so we were looking for something new to replace it, something new and exciting. I had been in the gift industry already for 20-odd years, and my husband had been in wholesale for about 30 at that time, so there was very few that was new and exciting around. This one particular trip to China, for some reason both of us got very sick. So while we were there, my husband said to me, we can't waste our time. We've spent the money. We might as well go find something, go look at something. I said, don't be silly. I'm sick. I want to stay at the hotel. He says, no, come on, we're going to go out. So out we went. Lo and behold, I come across this piece of cloisonne, take one look at it and say to myself, this is a Christmas ornament. And we stayed actually 2 more days, even though we were sick, negotiated with the factory to bring in a small amount of cloisonne. We actually only brought in $3,000 worth. When the cloisonne actually came, I took one look at it, I sat on a pallet in the warehouse and started to cry. It was not at all what I wanted. My husband, who had no idea what I wanted at all, said, it's very pretty, why don't we just put it out and see what the buyers say? We put it out. Inside of 2 weeks, we sold 240 pieces, and this was in a retail environment, because we had a retail as well at that time. I knew I had something. The following year, we were able to bring in our first container, and that was astounding to me, since the item is totally made by hand. We had seen the production of it where every little wire is hand applied, and I said I will never be able to bring in a 40-foot container. In case you don't know, a 40-foot container is the back of an 18-wheeler, and we had that filled with Christmas ornaments. Since that time, almost 10 years have passed. We've done more than Christmas ornaments. We've gone into home accessories and home decor, and we have, in fact, this particular season we're opening our first permanent showroom in Atlanta, and we want to welcome you all to it if you are going to the Atlanta market. So take a look through our website and see what you can see, and if there's any questions, please don't hesitate to call us. All of our people are very cooperative, they're very knowledgeable, and they're very honest. If you ask them, does this sell well? They will tell you the truth, yes or no. If you ask them, do you like this item? They will tell you the truth, yes or no. And I depend on them to do that because that's always the way I ran my businesses. So please, take a look through. If you have any questions, again, don't hesitate to call. Any one of us will be more than happy to walk you through. I'm an old girl, so the web was new for me as well. But we can get you through it, and you could place your first order that way. Or, in the event that it's a little bit too complex, call for a catalog. We'll be happy to send one out.
Inspiration comes from nature, natural form, even the human body, or anything that strikes my fancy, different physical formations or rocks or what have you. I usually tailor them to what I'm trying to accomplish in my work. Well, I don't do anything specific like a figure or a tree or anything like that. It's the essence of these things that I'm after, you know, the form itself. When I plan a piece, there are different approaches I sometimes use. Generally, there may be something that catches my fancy, like a dance movement or a rock formation or something. And then I try and work out a composition by looking at these forms and trying to make them consistent with what I'm trying to accomplish within that framework of that composition. I always considered myself an artist. I was always drawing and what have you. And for many years, all I wanted to be was a painter. And then when I came to university, I was exposed to sculpture. Before that, sculpture was a foreign language to me. And I became very enamored of three-dimensional form. For a while I was trying to do both, but after graduation I found that time was just of the essence. I had to make a living and this and that, so I concentrated on sculpture. I found working with steel to be the most alive material for me. It seemed to have a life of its own when I would work with it, and that's how I chose that over other medium. Painterly influences, I was early on a very serious painter. As I said previously, sculpture was a foreign language to me. After I became exposed to different media, I found it the most satisfying way of working. To this day, I'm working in 3 dimensions, but I still keep trying to climb back on the wall by making reliefs and things like that. Direct metal sculpture, by that I mean welding and forging, was the thing closest to what I wanted to accomplish.
what I call this art is bricolage, which is making artful use of the things that you have around you. And so I call myself a bricoleur. I'm also an illustrator and a gallery artist and a designer. What brought me into doing this particular style, which as far as I know is unique, is an acquaintance asked me to do a short piece on copyright and collage because I have a certain expertise in copyright matters. I do a radio call-in show occasionally on the local NPR station about copyright. And this person does paper dolls and self-publishes books and gives workshops, and her paper doll style is based heavily on collage. So she asked me to write this article, and she said, by the way, why don't you do a doll for the book? And I had never done anything like that before. My style prior to that was entirely two-dimensional. And so I said, why not? Gave it a shot. Decided that I was not going to emulate her style of working, but try to find my own. And when I was casting around for some way to joint the figures, the little cutout pieces into a figure, I looked at a button jar and a little light went off in my head, and I have been just in love with doing this kind of work ever since. That happened about 8 years ago. So I've been working pretty exclusively in this style ever since. I've always known that I was going to be an artist. In some ways I feel like I didn't have any choice about the whole thing. I practically came out of the womb with a pencil in my hand. I'm fortunate in that there are a number of artists in my family. My great-aunt Jean was a WPA artist. Two of her nieces, my grandmother and another cousin, were very artistic. My own mother and father were both creative and encouraged me. I never got finished toys or anything for Christmas, and I got boxes full of raw materials. I work with the materials that I use largely because I had them on hand when I first started doing this work. I limit myself to a certain palette of materials. I try not to, if say a figure in one of my pieces is holding a comb, instead of going out and purchasing a comb made for like dollhouse miniatures, I make the comb out of the materials that I have on hand. To me, that's much more authentic, and it keeps me rooted in my bricolage sense. Otherwise, to me, it would be assemblage, taking ready-made objects and assembling them in an artful manner. This way, I try to make the different items in my pieces out of what's at hand, and I try not to get too fancy with my materials. So, tends to be humble materials: chipboard and illustration board, wire, beads, buttons, thread, and paint.
First of all, it's a racing airplane. It's strictly a racing airplane. It's designed to do just one thing. It's designed to go from one point to another as fast as it can in a straight line. It's not designed for aerobatics. It's not designed to be comfortable. It's not designed for any other feature but to go fast. It's kind of like a Formula One race car. Time I had been thinking about building a model of this airplane, took out my tape measure, realized I could build an entire airplane in this room. And at one point, all the parts of the airplane, the entire airplane, were in this room. There are a couple of very unusual details about this airplane that you're probably not going to find in other aircraft. The first thing I want to point out is that the propeller turns in the opposite direction. Most airplanes turn clockwise. This one turns counterclockwise and goes around in this direction, which the effect that has on the pilot is that in order to counteract the torque from the propeller, he has to use the rudder. So you're pushing the opposite rudder pedal.
To be advised, we're going to have a